Welcome to the news for the week of 19 April 2020 in the time of the plague. Today, Starbleed, the changing security landscape, Pulse VPN, Zoom, and the Metaverse possibly realized. All this and more, and Jason Wood on today's Security Weekly News.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
It's the show that keeps you up to date on the latest security news twice a week, your trusted source for accurate security information and expert analysis. It's time for Security Weekly News. As technology continues to evolve and expand, so have the countless ways our critical systems can be put in jeopardy. Ransomware attacks, misconfiguration, user error, and malicious threat actors, to name a few. As IT infrastructures continue to grow and diversify, how do you ensure stable security? Core Security, a help systems company, provides an analytics-driven, layered approach to security with a portfolio that enables both proactive and reactive responses. With Core Security, you can reduce risk by limiting access, detect upcoming and active threats, test for security weaknesses, and efficiently monitor data for actionable insights. To learn more, visit securityweekly.com/core security.
All right, all the news. Yeah. I was going to lead with a story, a COVID story, because, it's like, wow, who isn't leading with COVID stories? But mine is about the idea that attacks have shifted. And I thought this was a very interesting article for you. Basically, they're talking about how rapidly attack surfaces can shift and how you may need to be thinking about security in a different context going forward, especially when we think about the next shift. Because obviously we've all seen, and I know Jason's going to talk today about attackers taking advantage of the pandemic, but it seems like more and more we're seeing attackers develop frameworks, the sort of malware as a business model, and all this starting to shift where it happens very quickly, and they change their footing in order to better attack individuals and organizations based on what's going on. So for instance, food and beverage services had a 6% worldwide increase in attacks. And there was, for some reason, a 125% increase in attacks on food and beverage services in Germany. I mean, I don't know. They didn't explain why, and I don't guess they know. This is stuff people are going to be studying for a while. But the financial industry saw a 3% increase, and all this was in March. They saw a 3% increase with large increases in attacks in Italy, the UK, and Spain. All this was based on an Imperva report that tracks month-to-month threats. So it's really interesting thing to look at and break it down by the industries and the types of attacks that they were seeing reported and the type of vulnerabilities they were seeing reported. So I really like that in the sense that it means we all need to be more flexible, I guess, in our ability to respond, because we see so much effort being spent focused on phishing and being focused on all sorts of specific, but we can see these threats shifting based on what works and what's going on in the world. For instance, cross-site scripting was the most common attack vector in the financial services industry. This is based on vulnerability reporting. They indicated that the network denial of service, distributed denial of service, was up 37% in March. So you're seeing that kind of thing, and we've seen stories in the news on that over and over again over the last month or so since we've been sitting here at home while people were actually talking about how those attacks came together. The largest number of attacks that they were reporting were remote code execution, remote file inclusion type attacks. Were 52.6%, and the cross-site scripting attacks at 32.1%. And I mean, that's pretty amazing to me to see those things kind of quantified and to see how they shifted. So that was really what I guess that's what piqued my interest in it, was because it was shifting, and we have to be careful not to get too sort of locked into one model, I think would be the message there. CISA issued an urgent, not just a basic warning, but an urgent, and it should be urgent, that Pulse Secure VPN users are still being attacked with the exploit from CVE 2019-11-510. Now that exploit was, the CVE was issued in April of 2019. And a patch was issued, or that's not when the CVE was issued, a patch was issued in April of 2019. But people didn't patch. I mean, we all know that, right? We've heard that over and over again. But this is the reason I put this story in here. I mean, you may have read the story, but I wanted to tell you one other thing about this. A lot of entities patch their servers. So they did what we tell them to do, but they didn't change their credentials. So what happened was they patched, but because the exploit was actually the ability to extract their credentials, they didn't change the credentials so that people can still get in. So even though they've got the patch in place, it didn't help. So, you don't need an exploit if you can just log in. So you're going to have to be a little more, rigorous in pursuit of eliminating these compromises. Big problem there. So if you are using Pulse Connect Secure for VPN, you need to patch and change the credentials. So let's be sure and tell our people that when we get to that. And then there's Starbleed. Another great name, I tell you. I don't know where they make these names up, but I do like them. Starbleed. So Starbleed is a very techy sounding thing, but I'll explain it to you a little bit. This is a flaw in field programmable gate array chips, which are called FPGAs. And these are the chips that are sort of the replacement for what we used to call programmable ROMs. And they're used and embedded in industrial control systems, medical devices, aviation systems, radio, you name it. A lot of stuff uses these FPGA type chips. So the chips are designed to be configured in the field. So they come with a sort of built-in environment, and you can program them on site to do very specific tasks at very low levels. So, and it usually logic gate stuff. So Horst Goetz Institute for IT Security at Ruhr Universität Bochum and Max Planck Institute for Security and Privacy discovered that a critical vulnerability exists which can be exploited, which would allow the chip to be taken over by the attacker, which means they could effectively change the programming on the chip. So these were the focus of these, and it could apply to other brands as well, but the focus of these were FPGAs from Xilinx, and those were targeted in this experiment. And they initially felt in their report that you had to have access to what is called the JTAG, which stands for Joint Test Action Group, which is essentially a programming interface for these kinds of chips. And there's another interface model called Select Map, which is another component of it. And if you can access those two things, you can essentially program the chip. But this allowed you to get around the programming and the security. But then they immediately turned around and said it may also be possible to do this remotely. Xilinx published a security advisory, and I did put the security advisory from Xilinx on the wiki. So if you want to go read up on it or do your own experiments or whatever, that would be cool. The Tor project was forced to let 13 of their 35 people go due to the COVID-19 pandemic. That represented a pretty significant reduction in Tor's overall operating staff, which is now down to 22 people. So they basically reduced 37% of their workforce. The reason I mention this is Tor is a donation-funded organization, and due to probably many factors, including people being laid off, people being uncertain about the future, people being sick, and the pandemic in general, I guess their donations must be down. So if you do use Tor, now might be the time to go out and support that platform if you want to see it stick around. So they've downsized quite a bit. All right. Cyber attacks, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because I know Jason's going to talk about this, but cyber attacks are being leveraged by COVID-19. Google reported last week that 18 million emails a day were rejected due to preying on COVID-related content. So that was how much kind of stuff they were getting. A lot of these related to stimulus checks and information about financial relief due to the pandemic. They said about 1/5 of the phishing emails they captured on their platform were related to coronavirus or COVID-19 in some component. Checkpoint went on to report that 4,305 domains that were related to the stimulus checks or relief packages had been registered since January, and 28 2,081 of those domains were registered in March. So of these, they immediately identified 38 as malicious, 583 were suspicious. So keep your blacklist up to date. And Jason's going to talk more about that whole issue when we in a little bit. Zoom software vulnerabilities have been pretty well known since last year. As the pandemic took off, we saw a vast increase in users on the Zoom platform. Well, Dropbox held a hacking competition at H165, which is in Singapore, and they had large bounties being paid for Dropbox vulnerabilities. It was something like 330,000 US dollars. But in the process of all this, a major flaw in Zoom was found by some of the hacking participants in the bounty program. Apparently, two people from Australia, according to the story, they were on an airplane trying to think about Dropbox hacks and came up with a Zoom hack. But that's not really the point of the story. The point of the story was all this ended up sort of revealing that apparently, and according to some unnamed Dropbox, and it said unnamed former Dropbox engineers, that Dropbox was well aware of problems with Zoom going all the way back. Defenders of Zoom, which included quite a few people, said that Zoom was, of course, never designed to be really an end-user platform. It was supposed to be an in-house business type model, and that turning it loose to everybody on Earth was asking for trouble. But I'm like, okay, well, maybe you should fix that. The unnamed sources said that Zoom was always a problem for Dropbox when they were working there. And apparently Dropbox had been offering bug bounties on Zoom all the way back, several years ago. Zoom did announce earlier this month that they would devote all of their engineering resources for the next 90 days to security and privacy. Zoom does remain one of the most popular platforms in use during the pandemic. And with that, when we return, we will welcome the guy voted most likely to create genetic mutations from a secret lab, Jason Wood, who's going to talk to us about attackers taking advantage of the pandemic.
The question is simple. Have any of the systems on my network been compromised? The answer is harder than it should be. Enter AI Hunter. Active Countermeasures has automated and streamlined techniques used by the best pen testers and threat hunters in the industry to create AI Hunter, a network threat hunting solution that does the first pass of a hunt for you to identify systems that are most likely to be compromised and scores the results on a scale from 0 to 100. You can then research those systems in depth with AI Hunter. Focus your valuable time on the systems that need your expertise with AI Hunter. Sign up for a personal demo today at securityweekly.com/ACM.
Welcome back. Jason Wood is going to join us now with his commentary. Hi, Jason.
Hey, I wonder where you get these most likely to create a what?
I got to introduce you somehow. If I just said, like brilliant hacker or something, it wouldn't be any fun.
Well, I never know what to expect.
Well, I like to keep you off balance. It gets a more, honest response.
There you go. Well, as Doug had mentioned several times, my focus this week is really just on, kind of what the attackers are doing during this pandemic. And I suspect most of us have heard the phrase, or some variation of it, never let a crisis go to waste. And that seems to be the motto of the attackers that are out there. As I was looking around for news, at the news for different things I could bring up to the podcast this week, I was just staring at story after story after story about some kind of security incident, phishing campaigns, or other scams that are currently occurring. And not all of these are focused, using COVID-19 as its point of fear or I don't know, point of getting a reaction out of us, but you're just seeing a lot of activity occurring, and certainly a lot that is focusing on COVID-19 as a way to get a rise out of people. One of the things I looked at is this, we look around the news, usually in local news. You can find stories of people helping each other out and watching out for each other. And that's excellent to hear because everybody, needs a little bit of a helping hand in times like this, even if it's just some friendship from neighbors and stuff like that. But you'd kind of hope that the bad guys would maybe cut us a little bit of a break and slow down a little bit. After all, everybody's getting hammered all around the world. This isn't limited to one country. Maybe the bad guys or the attackers are stuck in quarantine like the rest of us. Who knows? As nice as a dream as that may sound, like, the reality is quite different. If anything, the attackers have stepped up their activities, it seems, and are targeting any and all points of weaknesses that they can find. Now, I'll admit some of my perspective on that statement is based on some of my work on the Overwatch team, threat hunting team at CrowdStrike, where we're watching some pretty crappy stuff happening with people targeting like healthcare organizations and things like that, which is kind of disgusting during a time when healthcare systems are extra stressed. But nonetheless, so when I read the news and I see what's being reported, I get a little bit frustrated about the idea of these folks taking advantage of folks. And as Doug has, like I said, pointed out, we already have a lot of examples with phishing campaigns and targeting stimulus checks for people. The attackers are definitely going after people's worries and either trying to scam people out of their money or deploy malware or things like that. Some of the stories I saw here talk about ransomware attacks or targeting energy companies with spyware. There are a number of different breaches that have occurred. And you almost get a little numb to some of these numbers. One of the concerns I have, of course, is we're working from home. Everybody's working from home. That can, anyway. People are feeling, more frustrated about this, maybe a little more isolated, and they're more likely to respond to some of these ploys. They're probably working on systems that don't have the same level of monitoring and security controls that would have been in place had they been in the office. And organizations themselves are putting systems online in insecure fashion because they're in a rush to get an application out there online or resources online so that their users can continue to work, or employees can continue to work. And they want people to be able to reach that easily. Which, just kind of an inject here, read that as no, do not put remote desktop protocol and SMB on the internet. It's just not going to end well for you. I don't care how small you are. This all results in an increase of attacks. So, what are some ways that these folks are looking to cash in? The attackers are attempting to exploit. Here are just some of the news articles that I found. I'm just going to read the headlines of these and give them to you as a way of getting some awareness about what's happening. One, hacker leaks 23 million usernames and passwords from Webkinz children's game. I remember that from when my kids were really little, so I was actually surprised to see that one still around. But they're even going after the Webkins. Hackers steal $25 million in cryptocurrency. COVID-19 phishing update. Bad actors using stimulant payment delays to capture banking credentials. Basically, people are getting freaked out that they're not going to get their money, so they go ahead and enter their bank username and password into their systems, and then the bad guys go to town. Maze ransomware attack hits Cognizant. Oil and gas firms targeted with Agent Tesla spyware. Nintendo accounts are hacked and are used for buying Fortnite currency. So got to get that in-game currency going on here so you can probably resell it. And COVID-19 phishing lures explode. As Doug said, Google blocks something like 18 million COVID-related messages per day, which I'll be honest, I was a little surprised that it was only 18 million. And there's a lot more than this. So what's the point of all that? Well, a couple things. One, as security professionals, we need to stay on point and be very active, monitoring for suspicious activity. We're not getting a break here, and in the midst of trying to get systems out there to remote employees and best conducting business as we can, we still can't let our guard down. So yeah, don't relax on that. You also may get some pressure to do things in a way that we shouldn't, to relax some security standards or just flat out disable them. After all, someone might say, how likely is it for somebody to find our one server out of the millions and millions that are on the internet? And the answer to that is, yeah, somebody's going to find it. It's going to get scanned down on an automated basis. And now what you were trying to do to keep your business going now really locks it up solid, maybe with some ransomware or something like that. What I wanted to point out here is also these stories are a little bit of an opportunity for us, because they are occurring, to pay attention to them and use them for some of our awareness campaigns inside of our companies. So spend some time looking around the news. It's all over the place about stories relating to organizations that are similar to yours, maybe in similar businesses, stuff like that. And just make people aware of what's happening. You give an update on, hey, here's what we've been doing this week, and maybe to your CIO, here's what we've been doing this week, here's what we've accomplished. Oh, and here's some stories of interest about trends that are occurring with attackers right now in businesses or industries related to us, and you put those out there, or things that could impact our users that we need to be aware of. And the point here is not to run around and start screaming that the sky is falling and scare people and make promises of doom and destruction and stuff like that, but to provide awareness of it so that they can make maybe some better informed decisions about risks that your organization faces, and hopefully slow down the idea of you're getting the pressure put on you to expose SMB to the internet, and you're being outvoted because everybody has got a C in front of their title. So these are just some ideas of ways you can actually take some of this information, relay it on. You can also relay some of these stories, particularly the ones that are targeting just regular folks out there, things for like their stimulus checks or whatever your government has going on for programs related to the pandemic. Let people know about that what the attackers are doing, so that they can be more aware as they're evaluating this. I know as I talk to family members, and they'll ask me some questions about things that they've heard of, things that we take as just kind of common sense, and yes, everybody should know this, they actually don't. So pass that information along, help them make better decisions. Hopefully, through both of those, we improve both our coworkers' ability to get through this in a safe way, and also prevent our organizations from going down a path that's going to cause more disruption than we're already experiencing. So go ahead and make sure that our coworkers are aware, and that we ourselves are aware. The bad guys are certainly not going to allow us to catch a break during all of this. They're going to push it and take advantage, and they're going to do it without remorse. They really don't care, particularly like I mentioned, the healthcare stuff. If they're willing to go after healthcare organizations with ransomware while they're crushed trying to treat people, they don't care about anything. So no remorse there from their part. So be aware. Take a look at the stories in the show notes and see what you can do.
All right. Thanks, Jason. I was always surprised to find out the amount of in-game currencies that are traded in other sources. I was reading a story, this was several years ago, about Nintendo trying to block people from basically purchasing gear to use in games that they were buying from a third party, and then they would go into the game and buy it from them for almost nothing, and it's like really complicated. So absolutely,
yeah, it's quite the business, actually. It has been for
it's quite
years.
The business. I looked into it. It was like, wow, this is lucrative. Maybe I should start a company to resell used World of Warcraft stuff. Well, in that light, is the next version of the internet, which we sometimes call the Metaverse, and I was calling the Meta Web because I thought it sounded interesting. Is it going to be run by telcos or by Fortnite? The Metaverse, which the original term came from Snow Crash, which was, and I'm sorry, Neil, But I think it was at least a little bit derivative of Neuromancer, but I don't know. I think Neil Stephenson actually coined the term metaverse, but this may all be becoming a reality based on this last story. Fortnite was already trying to provide a sort of overarching world where people can do more than just play a game. We've seen that down through the years, whether it was with World of Warcraft or Halo or any of these other games where people can talk to each other. They've set up bars and taverns. Well, Silicon Valley is apparently also trying to pursue what was fiction in the 1980s and is now maybe on its way to becoming fact. Social media has shown that people love to interact online, and that games like World of Warcraft, Fortnite, Minecraft, you name it, pretty much any modern gaming platform that you see, it has started to provide both gaming and social environments so that people can interact both in game and sort of offline to the game. The current plague pandemic has more than shown our need for mechanisms for interaction. So it may be that someone like Epic Games, who makes Fortnite, may well build something like the Metaverse in Snow Crash or in Neuromancer in the near future. It's been tried before. So Second Life, et cetera, have been companies that sort of tried to create this idea and put it into play, but it didn't really seem to be quite ready in terms of the technology when Second Life came out. But it seems like the time may be coming when we can actually just live, function, and interact in this metaverse. Network engineers, fear not. It's still got to run somewhere, and there's still going to have to be some kind of wire backbone and so forth, and everything's going to have to communicate. So security professionals, hey, no problem. But if you get a hot tip for an investment, be sure and let me know. And that's the news for now. In the time of plague, I'm Doug White. Thanks for joining us for this episode of Security Weekly News. I'll be back Friday with the Security Weekly News wrap-up. Stay safe out there.